Thanks for joining JavaScript webinar from JPassion.com. Today's topic is second Dojo topic. So today we are going to cover Dojo tools basics. So this is what we are going to cover. So let's go to the presentation. So these are the topics that we are going to cover today. Configuring Dojo, and we'll spend some time learning Dojo animations and data retrieval through dojo.data, and then drag and drop through dojo.dnd package. So let's talk about how you can configure Dojo. Dojo configuration is represented by dojo.config JavaScript object, and this object gets created during Dojo's bootstrap process. Now, populating dojo.config object, this is a JavaScript object, so JavaScript object is basically hash, right? Meaning you have set of properties. So properties of this configuration, in this case is the configuration properties, can be populated through in one of the two ways. Declaratively using data dojo config attribute, or you can create dojo config object programmatically. So let's see an example of configuring Dojo declaratively. Here you are going to use data dojo config attribute. Okay. By the way, it's introduced in Dojo 1.6, and it is the same thing as DJ config attribute in Dojo 1.5 and below. Okay. And the reason they actually changed the name of this attribute is to make this attribute to be HTML5 compatible. And we'll talk about Dojo and HTML5 in Dojo Advanced topic when we are going to cover that. Is Dojo Advanced is here as topic 13. Okay. All right. So here, this is the way that you are going to configure your Dojo config object by using data Dojo config attribute, and then Dojo config object gets created, and these are the properties of that Dojo config object. You can create Dojo config object yourself programmatically. So this is the way that you are going to create Dojo config object, and basically you create a JavaScript object, and these are the set of properties. Okay, so relatively straightforward. Question from Dojo. What version of Dojo are you covering? I'm currently using 0.9 and having difficulties moving to 1.5 due to several syntax changes. We're actually using 1.7, and 1.7 has in fact a lot more changes than from the 1.0.9 to 1.5. Even though backward compatibility is actually provided. Okay, so in 1.7 they introduced what is called the AMD, which we covered a little yesterday, the asynchronous module definition. That's actually a huge change. Okay, so we're gonna actually use 1.7 most of the time. Sometimes you're gonna use 1.6. Okay. All right. So this is the way that you are going to configure your Dojo programmatically, creating Dojo config object. Now let's take a look at a couple of attributes. Parse on load attribute. This is actually used to search and instantiate Dojo widgets. So the default is false, and when it is set false, then you have to call parser.parse method, meaning parser method or parser object, for searching and instantiating Dojo widget yourself. If it is set to true, then it will be automatically searched and parsed, and Dojo widget objects are going to be created for you. Okay, async attribute. It defines if Dojo core could be loaded asynchronously or not. So I'm going to actually talk about difference between 1.6 below and Dojo 1.7. So the values could be true, false, or legacy async. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between 1.6 and 1.7 in this respect. So in 1.7, it introduced async true. In 1.6 and below, it actually load everything in Dojo base as a default. So it does load everything, meaning it does load FX, XHR, and query and others. They are all loaded, okay, whether you are going to use it or not, okay. But setting async to true, it will not load these things. It will load only the module loader, okay. So it will enable, so basically setting async to true enables you to truly require only what you need, okay, making your code written in 1.7 smaller and faster than the code written with older versions, because older version, whether you are going to use FX or not, it will load it as part of Dojo base. Question, which is a recommended way, programmatic or declarative way? Yeah, either one is fine. There is, not that much difference. Okay? By the way, one thing I want to actually make sure that I didn't actually say, when you're doing the configuring Dojo programmatically, you have to create this object before you are actually invoking this Dojo.js. So this one has to be before this Dojo.js. Okay, so either one is fine. As you can see, it's pretty simple either way. Okay, you can also set locale and extra locale. So locale is used to set a locale for this Dojo instance, and extra locale is used to load extra locale resources. It's basically loading resources on that particular locale, because you do not want to load every single locale resource. Again, that could actually slow you down. Okay, so let's try first the exercise. By the way, for those of you who have an access, you can certainly download the hands-on lab, and you can certainly do, you can actually take a look at the hands-on lab document. By the way, everything I actually demonstrate here, you can actually do yourself by following this hands-on lab. So I'm actually doing exercise 1 here. I'm gonna actually try these two, okay. Oh, wait a minute. I'm actually looking at the... Oh, here we go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is the declarative. So this is the code. So I'm going to actually just run that code. Okay, so those are config declarative. So this is the code. So we are using Dojo data config attribute, okay, and you can actually set your custom attribute as well. Okay, so here we set the async to true, and we have our own custom attribute, and then we set the parse on load false. So in this case, you have to call parser yourself, parse method of a parser object. And we are using AMD syntax here. So basically, I'm requiring these dependencies, meaning these modules will be loaded, and then this function will be invoked. So what I need is registry, parser, dialog, and yesterday we learned DOM ready, meaning DOM is ready before this function will be invoked. So we parse the page so that all the widgets are going to be in registry, and then we are going to find the dialog here. Okay, so we have a dialog widget. Okay, so this is the dialog widget, and we are using data Dojo type and data Dojo props. Okay, so again, this is the new attributes, newly named attributes. Okay, all right. So basically, we are displaying. Then we are going to use the to JSON. We actually convert this Dojo config object, okay, into JSON, and then we are going to display it. So we set the dialog contents with that JSON object, and then we are going to show it. Okay, so let's try to run this guy. Okay, so as you can see, it does have a lot more attribute. We just set async, and then we set has, and we set parse on load, and we set full, and those are the ones that we have set, but it does have other attributes, as you can see. So that is declarative way of actually specifying the Dojo configuration. This is the way that you're going to configure programmatically. Again, it's not that much different. We are basically creating Dojo config object ourselves, and the rest of the code is the same. Okay, and if I run this code, it should actually work exactly the same. Okay, all right. So that is that. Let's move on to the next topic. Next topic is animation. So animation is supported in Dojo in various packages. So the base Dojo contains some animation features, and then other packages contain the other animation features. For example, wipe in and wipe out are actually not in base Dojo, but in other packages. All animations in Dojo should around a single class called the animation, dojo.animation. Okay. So this is a JavaScript object that captures animation functionality. So Dojo.animation is a foundation class for all Dojo animations. It provides several simple methods good for controlling your animation. So once you got the animation object, then you can call play, pause, stop, and go to % method of that animation object. So this is the case that I'm actually calling fade out built-in method, okay, and it will return animation object. So I receive an animation object, this animation object, to this variable, then I can call play. Okay. All right. Now you are going to, when you create the animation object, you provide the properties. Okay. So in this case, I specify one of the property. In fact, one of the required property is target node that you want to apply your animation. So in this case, I'm going to search for a string ID element, and that element is the target for the animation. Okay, so when you call play method of animation, that this string ID element will get animated. And this code is the same thing as this. I can actually, I actually call fade out and this, and then I can just call play. Okay, so same code. Node is a target of animation, as I said before. So here again, I can actually get any target of my choice. Okay, so here I'm gonna find some ID element, and then I'm gonna find the parent node of it, and then I'm gonna use that parent node as a target of my fade out, okay, animation. Okay, so let's do phase animation. So let's try this. Let's run this guy first, and then we'll take a look at the code. So here fade out, fade in, fade out and in, and you can pause and resume. So when I do this, I can pause and then I can resume. Okay. All right. Now let's take a look at the code. I'm gonna actually use hands-on lab documentation because that actually has some highlighted. Okay, so I'm gonna use this code. So here we created animation object. Okay, so this is the target node and this is the duration, 3 seconds. Okay, so we have a fade out of animation object and fade in animation object, and in this code we have 5 buttons: fade out, fade in, and fade out and in, and pause and resume. Okay, and whenever this button gets called, it will call do animation and passing some number. So based on number, so this is the do animation method. This is the do animation method, and based on the number, it will use a particular animation object. It could use, in this case, if it is 1, then it will use a fade out animation object. If it is 2, it will use fade in animation object. And this is the case that I'm actually chaining fade out and fade in object. Okay, so it creates again animation object, but this is a chaining of fade out and fade in animation. Okay, and then it's gonna call play method of that animation object. Okay, so that is pretty straightforward. Now let's do the second one. Second one is, let's run this animation. So this is again very simple. So I'm gonna just click fade block out, fade block in, fade block out, and fade block in. This is in fact simpler code. Okay. So this is the code. Okay. So here we are using Dojo Connect to register an event handler. So this is event handler. When on-click method is invoked on this fade out button, this function event handler will be invoked, and this event handler basically, creates a fade out animation object and then just play it. Same thing for this. Okay, so very simple code. Okay, and now let's actually move on to presentation. Animation property. So we have seen animation property of node, right? And we also have seen duration, meaning that animation will happen during that duration. So if you set 3000, then animation will, the duration of the animation is going to be 3 seconds. Delay is you delay this amount of time before animation gets started. Easing is to apply the effects such as exponential curve, bounce, and things like that. In fact, Dojo provides various easing functions, okay, through Dojo.fx easing module. Rate and repeat. So repeat is how many times you want this animation to be repeated. Okay, animation events. So during the animation, you could actually associate a particular event handler. For example, before begin, so you can call a function before animation begins. On begin is you want to have animation started at the same time you want to call this function. On end is when animation is ended, you want to call that function. On play is pretty much the same thing. So let's actually go through these things. So let's say I'm actually creating fade out animation object, and I have to have required node property, and then I can have this animation event handlers. Okay. So as I said before begin is executed synchronously before playing, meaning before animation gets played, this function will be invoked. On begin will be executed, simultaneously, so to speak, executed asynchronously immediately after starting. So it's actually in parallel. On end is when the animation is done. On play is when the animation is played. On animate is basically all of this. Okay, so this is the case that I have animation object fade out, and then I associate this event handler. So this function will be invoked when this animation, this fade out, is done. Okay. The on end and before end, you can also actually receive a target node. Okay, so here, you receive a target node as n here, and then you can actually change inner HTML of the target node. Okay, so this could be in fact useful when you want to, when animation is done, you want to actually change the value of the target node to some kind of message like a by, okay, indicating that animation is done or something like that. Okay, so animation property. Animation property is useful method for animating CSS properties. So by CSS properties, you can change color, background, size, whatever properties that you can set with CSS. Okay. So animation property is actually same thing as animation object. So it does have a set of properties, but it does have one additional, a special property called the properties. So this properties property will have CS properties as an hash. Okay, so let's see an example of this. So here I'm creating animation object. Okay, and this is the target node, and then it does have this special properties property. Okay, in which you can specify set of CSS properties. So here I'm actually setting the width of this target node to 300 from the current size. Okay, so when you run this guy, it will actually increase or decrease the size of this particular target node to 300 pixels. This is a case that you have a multiple CSS properties. So here I'm actually changing the CSS properties of this target node of some ID, width of 300 pixels, and I'm also changing height and font size. Okay. All right, so let's try animation properties. So let's try this guy. So I'm actually growing borders and shrink borders, growing borders and shrink borders. Okay, so let's see the code. So here, whenever a button of start button is clicked, I am running this function. Inside this function, basically, I created animation property object. Again, it does have CSS properties property here. I'm actually changing the width of the border width of this object to 100, and then I'm actually playing it, so it will, start the animation. And here, when reverse button is clicked, then this function will be invoked. Inside this function, I'm setting the border width to 1. Okay, so that's what's happening. Okay. All right, the next one is animation property. Here, I'm gonna run this one first. Yeah, it does have a lot of options. Back to white, white to black, text, embiggen, unembiggen. It sounds like a German. Widen, narrow. Again, you can pause and resume. Okay, so you can pause and resume, things like that. Okay, so again, this code is a bunch of creating animation property object, and then we are just setting the color and background, color and background, and here we are also setting the font size. Okay. So you can actually play around all these CSS properties. Okay, so in terms of logic-wise, it is relatively straightforward. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, okay. The last one is event. So let's actually run this event. Okay. So if I click here, this is the behavior you're gonna see. Okay, click, and all right, so let's see the code. Oh, I want to see the code. Okay, so here we are Dojo readying this function, meaning until DOM is ready, this function will not be invoked. And then we are querying show me the element. The show me element is here. Okay, so that is this click me things. And then what it does is that we create so on click it will call this function and it will receive event object, and then you can call the target of that event, which is the this show me element. So I have that node. Okay, now one thing I have actually talked about yet is dojo.anim. Dojo.anim is you create the animation object and then it immediately played. Okay, so you don't have to call play here. Okay, so here I create animation object. Okay, with background yellow and background green in 2 seconds. Okay, then I actually use this on-end event handler. So when animation is done with on-end, okay, I want to call this function. Okay, so this is the on-end event handler. So here I'm also creating again the animation object using anim and then play. So I change the color to orange, and then I'm also changing the inner HTML of the target node, the animation event demo finished. I'm also actually running the another animation to set the color to, I mean the text color to black. Okay, so that's basically what is happening. Okay, so let's move on. So this is what I just talked about. Dojo anim returns an instance of Dojo animation but begins the animation immediately. So you don't have to call that play here, even though it's still, it's syntactically, it's okay. It's going to be no op. Even if you say that play, it probably doesn't have any impact. Okay? Okay, so that is animation. Now, these are extra animations, okay? Animation features provided in non-base package. So you can combine and chain. So you have seen example of that already. Okay. So Dojo combine and Dojo chain and wipe in, wipe out. So this is the case that you are combining animation. So I have animation object of fade out, and I have another animation object, another fade out, and then I'm combining it into an array. So in this case, these fades out will be played in parallel. Okay. So that is combining. You can attach an event handler to combine the animation. So here I have a combined animation. Okay. So I combine these two animations, and then I can associate an event handler to a combined the animation. Okay. So in that case, this is the duration of 1000 millisecond, and this is the duration of 2000 millisecond, right? So whichever takes longer will be used as an end. You can also attach individual event handler. So if you want to associate an event handler to only a single animation object, then you can certainly add this on-end function here. Okay. And this one doesn't have event handler, this one does. Chaining animation. Chaining animation is playing that animation in sequence instead of parallel. Okay, so instead of combining, if you call chain, then it will run this animation first, and then it will run animation this 1 second. Okay, chaining animation using array. So combine and chain accept array of animation. So here I could actually create the array of animation. Okay, and then I'm actually using for each, and then I can check which animation I'm actually receiving for each, and then I can actually skip it or not. Okay, so you could certainly have this kind of array of animation, and depending on which animation it is, you can actually do something. Okay, so wipe in and wipe out. Again, this is a special animation object. It's basically wipe in and wipe out. Okay, so let's actually try wipe in and wipe out. Yeah. Wipe in, wipe out, wipe in, wipe out, and wipe in. And you can also pause, this one, pause, and this one. All right. I think there was a question how this pause and resume is implemented in Dojo. So it is implemented pretty much the same way any animation is implemented in any programming language. Okay, so it's basically set of snapshots, and they actually running it in sequence. That is basically animation, and you can actually control. Basically you can stop it, and when you stop it, that is a pause, and if you resume it, that is basically starting again. Okay, so it's nothing really specific to Dojo. That's the way all animation is implemented in all programming languages. Okay, so let's move on to so you can also have apply animations to node list. So here I'm actually performing Dojo query using CSS selector. So here I'm basically getting the node list of all items, all elements that has this dot items, the class, and then I can apply fade out for all of those node lists. Okay. All right, so that is animation. Now let's move on to data retrieval. So Dojo data is uniform data access layer. Okay, in the beginning, I think there was a question about whether there is a way that you can actually access JDBC, in JavaScript. I assume there is actually JDBC package out there, but in general, you don't actually have a higher level abstraction like a Dojo data. So that, if you think about even Java, typically you don't want to actually use JDBC in most cases. Instead of, you want to use a little bit higher level abstractions such as JPA or Hibernate and things like that. So you can think of Dojo data as a higher level of accessing any kinds of data. Okay, so it provides uniform data access layer. So all data is represented as an item or an attribute of an item. So with such an attribution, such a representation, data can be accessed in a standard fashion. Okay, so this is a good thing because you do not want to have a specialized way of dealing with, for example, for tree or grid or combo box. You want to use the same data for different form. So you want to actually use the same data for representing in tree, grid, or combo box, or whatever UI piece you might have. Okay, items can be also returned from fetches, and fetches you can specify filter properties. Okay, so it will actually say I want to actually fetch items that meet this set of properties. Okay. These are terminology comparisons. So on the left, these are the terms that Dojo data is using, and these are your database terminology. So in database, cursor is representing, let's say, point of your returned the data results, right? So that is actually data store. Database in database is going to be called data source. Okay, and then item is row, and attribute is a column, and identity is primary key. Query operation is basically where clause, and Dojo data API is basically JDBC. Okay, and request is SQL select. Okay, so data source provides data to something. So data source could be pretty much any data source. For example, it could be within, and it could be data source within your page, or it could be some static sources such as XML or JSON or CSV, or it could be dynamic sources, or meaning the data could be coming from programming logic, or it could be external data such as a Flickr or Google. Okay, so of course there could be database, the data source. Okay, so it does handle all kinds of data source. Okay, so basic data stores. So those are the data item file read store. This is for read-only data store, and it basically is in-memory store. It will actually store the data in JSON structured contents. Okay. When you have to write something, then you are going to use item file write store. Okay. So this is an example of creating data. So this is the this is the case that I have a data inside the page. Okay. So this is JavaScript object that contains an array of some the items. Okay. And so here I'm actually using item read store. So once I got the data, this is the store data, which is an object of this. So this store data is representing data object. Okay, and then I'm actually creating this item file store item file read store object, okay, and then I'm going to reference it with this country store. Okay, so this is going to be referenced in another part of your program. So here I'm using combo box, okay, for representing data of this. So I'm using country store here, and that country store is basically representing this file read store object, whose source is from this store data object. Okay, so this is the case that I'm actually using same data in the form of representing or presenting the data in combo box. Now, if I want to represent the data in a form of tree, again, I'm actually using item file read store object. Again, it will it will use the data, okay, and then this item read store is going to be represented as a country store. And then in this case, I'm actually using that country store in this Dojo tree model. Okay. So other data stores, it could be Google Search Store, Google Feed Store, Flickr Store, Wikipedia Store, XML Store, JSON REST Store, File Store, Database Store, and things like that. You can in fact create your own data store. Okay. So you can actually have a custom data store object. So let's try data store. So I'm gonna try the combo box here first. Okay. So let me run this code first, and we're gonna take a look at the code. So here it's actually representing this country data in the combo box. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the code. So this is the store data in which we have these items. Okay, so it's a country, Ecuador, and the capital, and the country and capital, and abbreviation. And then I am using that data source. Okay, in this case, data source is array object inside the page, and then I create item file read store object, and then I'm referencing it with country store, and that then the other widgets can use this reference country store. So in this case, it's going to use this data as data for this combo box. Okay, so this is what we have seen. Now we are going to take a look at the same data in a form of tree. So that is this guy. Okay, so let's run this guy. So the same data is represented in a tree structure. Okay, now if you take a look at the code, so again this is the same data. Okay. And then again we have a country store reference, and then in this tree is actually you're using forest store model and digit tree. And again, what's important is that it's actually referencing that country store. And this is the case that again we are using grid. Okay, so let's actually try to run that. So this is the case. We are using the same data again and presenting it in a form of a grid. Okay, grid. So let's run this guy. So basically we are representing in grid format. Okay. Again, if you take a look at the code, yeah, this is a little bit different data. Store data 2, okay, has more information, and yeah. Oh, this is right. I'm looking at this guy. Sorry. So here, this is the same data and then again here we are using data grid as UI component, but using the same data. Okay. The next case is a write. So this is the when you have to write something, well, actually change something. So this is a case. So let me actually run this code first. So here I'm gonna display some, let's say, cities. This one doesn't have cities. This one, Kenya has cities, and Sudan has cities, and Australia, not this one. Asia, maybe, not this one. Europe, North America. Okay, so Mexico has the cities. Now I want to delete all the cities. So here I'm gonna click this button, and you can see the cities of all these countries are actually deleted. So here we're actually changing things. Okay, so that is the code. So here, so store data 2, and we are representing the data with item file write store because we are actually changing it. Okay, all right. Okay, so last one is the drag and drop. So let's do the presentation. So drag and drop is supported through dojo.dnd, the module. So you can use movable function, movable method of DND. So basically, you can also have event handler. Okay. So what you want to do is here, I want to actually call movable. I want to actually create the movable object on this node. Okay, that means now this node is movable. Okay. Drag and drop, you specify source, represent source of items for drag and drop operations, and target is where you want to drop to. Okay. So this is the code a little bit to, yeah, so basically this is the source, and this is the target. So I'm gonna actually all right, so I'm gonna actually run the code, and we're gonna actually see examples. We'll see the code. So this is a case that I want to move something. So let's see what it can do. So for now, without making this element movable, okay, I cannot move. Okay, now I want it to be movable, so I click this button. Now I can move. Okay, so once I click this button, basically I created a movable object from this. Okay, so if you take a look at the code, so basically I'm creating movable object from that element. Okay, that's pretty much it. The next one is drag and drop. So let's try drag and drop. So this is the target, and these are the sources. So if I want to move this guy underneath, okay, this moved like this. Okay. All right. So the code is pretty simple. So I have these items as, DND source, and I have this item as DND target. That's it. Very simple. Okay. Okay, so let's see. The homework is to create 3 buttons, and then you're gonna create a drag and drop target location as you have seen just a few seconds ago. And then when button is drag and drop into a target, you want the button to expand its size 3 times, length and width, using animation property. Okay, so pretty straightforward and simple exercise. All right, so let me